All right, well, welcome everyone. And I know we have some folks still coming in. My name is Francis Shen, a law professor, work at the intersection of neuroscience and law, and I have the great pleasure of directing and working with the team at the Dana Foundation Career Network in Neuroscience and Society. And this is day 3 of our second annual virtual career fair in neuroscience and society. We're going to get right to our panelists after just a couple of thank yous and a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, for the thank yous, I want to thank the Dana Foundation. You see their logo featured here. Dr. Montoyo, Dr. Ramos, Sishan Dasgupta, Dr. McEntee, the entire foundation staff. They make it possible. If you haven't checked it out, their website, please do. We'll put it in the chat. Thank you, Foundation, for your support. Thank you as well to our entire Career Network team, some of whom are on this call tonight, all of whom are, or most of whom are featured on this slide, including Senior Fellow Emily Rodriguez, but the entire team, as well as our entire Shen NeuroLaw Lab. Thanks to all of our partners. If you're looking at this screen and you want to be a partner, it's easy. Just email us. It's easy to do. And we want to thank all of our partners. I also want to do a special thanks to one partner in particular, Simply Neuroscience. And we are lucky to have the founder and CEO of Simply Neuroscience with us. She's part of our team, Chinmay Belusus. Chinmay, you want to hop on and I'll spotlight you.
For sure, thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're super excited to have you all here tonight. I just wanted to briefly introduce Simply Neuroscience. We are a student-led nonprofit organization that's focused on early career neuroscience education and outreach initiatives. So we have a wide variety of resources listed on our website that hopefully complement your NeuroX explorations as well. And I'll drop the link in the chat.
Great, thank you so much. So back to our slides. Let me just say a couple things. So 3 things to know about tonight. First of all, if you want to know more about anything we talk about tonight, we put everything on neuroxcareers.org. That's our website. Everything is free there, so check it out, including videos from last year's career fair, lots of other events, interviews, and all sorts of things. Secondly, is to say that in addition to tonight, we have one more night. So if you've liked what you've seen so far, come back tomorrow night, Neuroethics and Neurolaw. Third thing to say, we would love your questions for tonight, and you can put those into the Q&A, so Zoom Q&A function. We have 4 panelists tonight. Each panelist, who I'll introduce in just a moment, will present, and then what we'll do is move into your questions, which I'll curate. And last thing, 2 more things to say. In the second hour, stick around. We'll have a bunch of breakout rooms, and we'll have great breakout room guests where you can talk one-on-one with a number of individuals. And then finally, you can subscribe to our newsletter for all sorts of information, and we hope you do. All right, let's get to tonight's panel. So I'm really excited. Tonight is one of my favorite nights of this career network because neuroscience is moving into so many new fields in ways that are exciting and innovative and unpredictable. And we've got some of the cutting edge folks here with us in terms of neurophilosophy, neurotheology, neuroscience, public policy, neuroscience and music, neuroscience and theater, in our breakout rooms, neuroarchitecture, neurophilosophy, neurodesign, and neurocinema. I mean, those are just really amazing ideas. And they're not just ideas, they're now fields. And the people we're going to hear from tonight are leaders in those fields. So I am going to introduce our first speaker, who is Dr. Andrew Newberg, and then I will introduce each of our next speakers as well. So I'm going to remove the spotlight from me, add it for Dr. Newberg, and give an introduction. So Dr. Newberg was very kind to be a returning star. Was here at our last career fair also. He is the Director of Research at the Marcus Institute of Integrative Health and a Professor of Emergency Medicine and Radiology at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital. He is a pioneer, probably the pioneer, I would say, in neurotheology. If you Google it, this is who comes up. His research explores brain scans of individuals engaged in religious and spiritual practices like prayer and meditation to reveal the neurological basis of these experiences. And even just describing that is pretty cool. He's authored a mere 14 books and has been featured in major publications. You might have heard him on the radio as well. He's a graduate of Haverford College and the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. And I think we're going to learn about what a medical doctor, a physician, is doing in the world of theology and what neurotheology is all about and how you might get involved. Dr. Newberg, thanks for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. Well, I'll give a little bit of background on myself and the work that I've been involved in over the years. As you said in the introduction, I am a physician, and really got into neuroscience through medicine. And obviously, there's different avenues, psychology and cognitive neuroscience and so forth. But through the medical career and medical education. What I ended up getting involved in is a field called nuclear medicine. And nuclear medicine is a field where we do all types of imaging by administering some type of radioactive material into the body, and could be looking at the lungs, looking at the heart. But my main area of research has been studying the brain. And so we can develop all different kinds of tracers that look at changes in blood flow, metabolism, different neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and so forth. And we could take pictures of that and see where how these different aspects of the brain's function are operating. A lot of my research in the world of nuclear medicine has been very traditional work. We started out doing studies on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's and depression and eating disorders and all different kinds of things that really help people to try to understand the physiology of these disorders. But at the same time, I have always been interested in, to me, what are, the big questions, questions about the nature of reality, how we perceive reality. Why do people believe different things? Why are there, this is a perfect day to say, why are there Republicans and Democrats? What's going on in the brains of people when they think one way versus another? If we're all looking at the same world, I always felt like, well, how come we just don't see the world all the same way and have all the same conclusions? But obviously we don't. And so a lot of my early studies, going even back into high school and college, was looking at neuroscience and trying to understand what's going on in the brain. But I soon realized that as wonderful as science is, and I still love science, there are big aspects that are kind of go beyond science. They're philosophical. There can be theological aspects about consciousness and how it works and how our minds work. What's the difference between the mind and the brain, and do we have a soul and so forth? So there's a lot of really fascinating questions. And I actually was just very fortunate to have two wonderful mentors, one in the world of nuclear medicine and another one who was a psychiatrist and also an anthropologist. And he had been looking at these questions also going back to really the 1970s. So we started to think about, well, what's going on in the brain when people are engaged in rituals, different practices, when people pray, when people meditate, what's going on when people believe, what's going on in the brain. And eventually the proverbial light bulb went off in my head. I said, well, gee, I'm doing all these brain scan studies of people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and depression and so forth. Why can't we use the same brain scan technology to study meditation, prayer, all these different spiritual practices? And we started doing this work in the 1990s, and it's really just been advancing and growing. I've been one of many people who are now beginning to look at practices like meditation and yoga and all these different types of spiritual practices. And it's ultimately developed into a field that some people consider to be called neurotheology. And so for me, neurotheology, very briefly, is the field of study that helps us to try to understand the relationship between the brain and our religious and spiritual selves. But it goes far beyond that, because that seems to be very limited. In fact, neurotheology is actually just sort of the neuroscience of theological questions, which is one part of neurotheology. But a couple of very important points I want to make, which is that for me, for the term neurotheology to work, I think that the neuro side and the theology side need to be defined very broadly. So the neuro side is neuroimaging, the kind of work that I do, but it's psychology, it's cognitive neuroscience, it's the study of consciousness, it's anthropology and the development of the human brain, it's studying diseases, it's psychiatry, neurology, and so forth. All the ways that we get at this brain-mind part of who we are as human beings. And theology is a very specific discipline. It's where you kind of analyze a religious tradition on the basis of their sacred texts and try to analyze it and understand it and so forth. And that is one thing that we can look at. How do we ask questions and try to find answers to those questions about the nature of religiosity and do we have free will and what is right and wrong and so forth, morality. And you're going to hear about discussions about ethics and so forth. So that's all part of it. But it also goes beyond just theology, and it is spirituality, how people engage the universe, the world, things that are greater than themselves, practices like meditation and prayer, as I mentioned, other types of spiritual practices, things like speaking in tongues, trance states, and now in today's world, there's a lot of interest in the use of psychedelics to induce different kinds of states and different kinds of spiritual states, uh, near-death experiences. I mean, the list kind of goes on of different kinds of spiritual experiences, practices, phenomena that we can potentially look at. And another very important thing I want to say is that for me, for neurotheology to work, I think it really needs to be a true two-way street. And what I mean by that is that it is not just the neuroscience of religion and spirituality. It's also not just a religious analysis of neuroscience, but it's really the two of them working together to help us understand who we are as human beings. And I actually think that neurotheology goes back thousands of years. I mean, the two most fundamental aspects of human existence have been the religious and spiritual on one side. We see these ancient temples developed. We see burials of people hundreds of thousands of years ago with the idea that there was something more, that where we go after we die, there was something more to us than just our physical body. So hundreds of thousands of years of religious and spiritual ideas. But of course, science and technology has been fundamental to who we are as human beings as well. So I think the merging of them to me is very exciting. And maybe the last thing I'll just say is that part of what I get very excited about in terms of neurotheology is that it really is a field that extends all the way from the very practical. We do studies looking at does mindfulness meditation or yoga or other types of practices improve depression, anxiety, heart disease, improve the immune system function, reduce inflammation, and so forth in the world of integrative medicine, all the way to understanding the mind and the brain. That's another aspect, to very esoteric questions, the philosophical, the theological. How do we understand the nature of reality? Epistemological questions, ontological questions, and how does our brain begin to engage those very questions? So, to me, it is a very interwoven, very reciprocating kind of thing. We have the questions that we can ask. We can think about how the brain helps us answer the questions, how it helps us to find those answers. And then when we have answers, what is it doing back to the brain, and how do we use that information to understand who we are? So it is a very exciting field. And again, what's really nice about it is that you can get to it from many different perspectives. So you could go and get into it through medicine, through psychology, through consciousness studies, cognitive neuroscience. And of course, because neurotheology has the religious and spiritual side, you can get at it from a philosophy, from theology, from pastoral care, and so forth, from all these different types of disciplines. So to me, it is a very engaging, very active, and very exciting field of work. And I hope, and we've really just scratched the surface. So we need all of you to get involved in these kinds of questions. There is a lot of work for us to do, and hopefully be happy to talk to any of you about it.
Great. Thank you so much. A great introduction to the field, and we'll be able to talk more. Um, Moving from neurotheology to sort of the intersection of neuroscience and philosophy, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jada Wiggleton Little. She is an assistant professor of philosophy at The Ohio State University, as well as a neuroethics fellow at the Cleveland Clinic. She earned her PhD in philosophy from the University of California, San Diego, and was an inaugural Sadler Scholar at the Hastings Center. She's also been a visiting scholar with the John J. Lynch MD Center for Ethics Program for Neuroethics and Clinical Consciousness. And her research is really fascinating. It's at this intersection of pain communication, disparities in pain management, encompassing bioethics, neuroethics, philosophy of mind, language, race, the brain. And I was just looking again at your publications and talks, and I think this talk sort of sums it up for me, one that you gave. How should we think and talk about pain? What an important and difficult question. And then to answer it, you're drawing on all these different disciplines and their traditions. And we're so glad that you're with us tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor. So yeah, as I said, my name is Jada Wiggleton Little. I am currently a philosophy professor And how did I even get into neurophilosophy? Maybe by no surprise, given my introduction, was through the path of pain. I've kind of always been interested in pain. And so even as an undergraduate student, I started off, I think, as many undergraduate students start, very much pre-med. I was considering a neuroscience minor, and I went to a small liberal arts school where, you had to take certain classes for gen ed requirements. And I found myself in a philosophy class, and something that was said in the philosophy class kind of really resonated with me. It was in a just general philosophy of mind textbook, and it says, if you believe you're in pain, then you're in pain. And for me, that summarized a lot of experiences I had growing up, kind of battling with the chronic pain condition of my own and trying to figure out how to articulate what that experience was, and kind of ways I had to navigate healthcare. And so I became very fascinated with how philosophy was talking about pain and how that was different from the ways in which it was being discussed in medicine. In medicine, it seemed to be this kind of given, we kind of settled into what pain was, but we acknowledged we didn't recognize pain and everyone the same. And then philosophers for, my goodness, arguably centuries have been fascinated by the mysterious nature of pain. It was like it's so subjective, it's so invisible. There's many different theories out there. And so I started off strictly what I call a philosopher of mind. So very much into that traditional sense of neurophilosophy. One of the pioneers in the field, Patricia Churchland, I had her book of how do we use neuroscience itself to inform our philosophical theorizing, what it is that we think states like pain, like pleasure, like even itching. However, we're going to describe that in the abstract. We like to imagine to match what the scientists are saying, that we're informing each other. And then it started to occur to me, well, yes, pain is this big, mysterious void that we can't seem to define, but yet we're able to recognize pain in a certain degree in most individuals. We have a whole field of pain medicine and pain management. So even though we don't necessarily know how to define this state, we have language, we have resources that are addressing it, but it's still not being equitably seen and managed into everyone. And so that's when I started to really shape into maybe it's not the nature of pain itself that's the biggest mystery. Like it's still a mystery, and maybe it's a mystery we would never solve, but it's a mystery that we've been able to operate with pretty consistently. It's something that between the brain and the actual engagement with others where I think the disconnect is happening. And so that pushed me to areas like philosophy of language. What is it to even communicate pain? How do we share such a complicated state with others? What is it that we expect people to do and respond to our communications? I became interested in social epistemology, like what is knowledge? What does it mean to know our own experiences? How do we learn from others? What requirements do we have to learn from others? Kind of like what is the nature of trust? And because I was more interested in the bigger assumptions baked into our pain diagnostics, into how medicine operates on the day to day, I found myself more pulled to philosophy. There was even a moment, I think my senior year, where I had a decision to make. I had got accepted into a palliative care nurse practitioner program or doing a PhD in philosophy. And again, I think what fueled me in those moments of, and I think for many people, when we think of medicine, we think of only one right path to do medicine, to kind of engage with medical work. And when thinking about it, I was like, what was I more passionate about? The kind of one-to-one patient engagement, or really thinking more broadly of how can we change the way we're asking patients questions? How can we expand the languages that we're using in our diagnostic tools, and how can we change the education that we're giving to medical students that fits into that intersection of what is the neuroscience saying pain is to the best of its ability? What are those limitations, and being explicit about that, and kind of giving language of how culture and society can train people to express pain in a way that's different from the quote unquote objective, and then vice versa, train people to interpret pain that's different from what we think is the objective. So when I had that moment, I was like, it's the philosophy, it's the philosophy part that's the most exciting to me. And that I could still get into the hospital, because that was the thing I wanted to do. I wanted whatever work I was interested in to have real world implications, to make a difference. And so I think a lot of people think of philosophy and they think we're like this abstract, the armchair in the clouds. And to a certain degree, there's a part of that. But that's so much of the concepts and again, the assumptions we have, taking that moment and that step back to be critical and think of how can we continue to shape them and change them to be more inclusive. And so that brought me into wanting to get my PhD in philosophy. And I went to UC San Diego. I primarily worked with a guy, Matthew Fulkerson. There was like at the time maybe 4 philosophers who study pain. And most of them were in Canada and a couple in like Scotland. And then we had like one in California. But even still, they were doing again that traditional philosophy of mind. What is just the nature of pain? And I was interested in how does that change when we're in the clinical space? And so one view of the nature of pain that really resonated with me is this thought that pain is a command, that what it is to feel pain, it's not like we get information from our body. It's not like our brain is telling us the pain is right there in our leg because of a broken femur. Like it's not that explicit. We're not informed of the cause, but rather what we seem to feel is this urge to do something, either take the weight off of our leg, either, move your hand off of the hot stove. And I thought that was fascinating because I was like, if that's true, if the neuroscience research is showing that there's this kind of sensory motor component of pain that is essential to that pain experience. And then even when we feel it as individuals, the phenomenology of it, it feels like I have to take action. Like I'm so motivated, I have no choice. Then what does it mean when I share my pain with others? It doesn't seem to be just like sharing the weather. Like if I tell you it's raining outside, it's not the same as this kind of heavy expectation to do something. That's up to you. But when I share my pain, even evolutionary speaking, we think that sharing pain, one of the aims is to elicit care and concern, is to elicit action. And so that kind of gave me a lot of thoughts of what is it to dismiss patients in pain, to dismiss people of color, to dismiss women. There's a lot of talk about, not believing patients' pains, that we think either because of drug seeking or we describing women as hysterical, right? Because again, we don't know what pain is. We got to trust people, but it's hard to trust people. We have a lot of biases, right? But there's another way in which we can dismiss people pain. Looking at the nature of pain itself, if pain is this action-oriented thing, it makes me take movement to take care of myself. And I share that with you. If you believe me and do nothing, if you're not motivated by it, that seems to be a kind of dismissal as well. So that's where a lot of my research has gone to recently. But because again, I got a lot of my training in philosophy, I want my work to be grounded in the clinical because that's the kind of change I would like to make. I felt pulled to get those clinical experiences. And that's kind of my first piece of advice is it wasn't at that time when I was looking at fellowships, there weren't a lot of opportunities or I didn't know where to look, right? And so I'm like, where do you go when you have this one particular question in your mind and you're trained in like maybe the humanities or the social sciences and you want enough clinical training, not because I want to practice medicine itself, but again, so that my social sciences and humanities can be informed. And so I had to just start Googling. I'm Googling like neuroethics, anything. And that's how I found the Neuroethics Visiting Scholar Program in DC. That's how I found the Neuroethics Fellowship in Cleveland Clinic. Was really just kind of taking that into my own hands. I had great mentors in California who, again, were amazing in philosophy, amazing in social epistemology, amazing in critical race theory, but they themselves didn't have the tools on the clinical front. And so trying to cultivate that experience for myself of what is it that I want my work to do? How do I maintain that like interdisciplinary place? And if it's not in the spaces that I'm in now, where do I go? And so even kind of being able to find specific neuroethics fellowships in which I could have those opportunities, but also there's been times where I kind of had to create opportunities, right? Like if I knew even now, like I'm not the strongest in kind of neuroscience foundation. So even though I'm taking a philosophy class, maybe I'm auditing a neuroscience class, maybe I'm sitting in an ethics committee. And so it's not one specific place that or fellowship that I would go to say, hey, I learned this interdisciplinary thing, but instead kind of picking up pockets. And so I think, as I said, with pain hits in psychology, pain hits in sociology, medicine, philosophy. And so I tried in every opportunity that presents itself to get as much training in those areas to inform that work. And then lastly, like the last panelist said, I think what's beautiful about neurophilosophy, but also kind of fascinating, is that there's no one right path. Like when I started off pre-med, I think pre-med is encouraging because you're like, you have steps. There's usually like you go to school, they print you a guideline, do this, take these classes, talk to these people. Neurophilosophy, same. We have people who go in with MDs, with PhD, with law backgrounds, people who go in it through English, right? There's so many avenues you can take. But what's beautiful is taking the avenue that fits best for you and the thing that you want to research. And just because you're in that space doesn't mean you have to be stuck in that space. So even though now I'm a philosophy professor, it's not like I only do philosophy. I still get to engage with the medical school. I'm part of the bioethics team there. I still participate in the Hastings Center, helping with kind of end of life conversations and pain work. I still get to engage with those in the psychology department. So whatever you decide is your home to do the work that you're doing, it still can count as neurophilosophy. It's just whatever feels comfortable to you. And so that's how I got here. It's all things pain and trying to still figure out those questions each and every day. Thank
Well,
you.
glad you're here. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jada. Um, we're next going to talk about neuroscience and music and advocacy and disability rights. And it's really wonderful to have with us Steph Ban. She is a disability rights advocate who brings extensive experience in cross-disability access and inclusion. She's also a program associate at the Center for Tech and Civic Life, where she helps develop a voter-centric standards for local election departments. Previously a communications assistant at the Association of University Centers on Disabilities, holds a BA in history from the University of Chicago, go Maroons. Research interests include history, disability studies, and musicology. And I was really struck that one of the intersections of neuroscience and music is music therapy. But in Steph's work, she challenges us to take a deeper look. So one of her publications, she explores this really important distinction between music as therapy imposed by others versus music as an access tool that's self-imposed via playlists. And so I'm sure we'll hear about a lot of that in your advocacy work and making real changes in the real world. So thanks so much for being with us today, Steph.
Awesome. Thanks, Francis, and thanks, Emily, and thanks for the rest of the team at Dana Foundation, and thanks to the audience. I'm glad to be here. My name is Steph Ban. My pronouns are she, her. A visual description, if anybody needs it. I'm a white woman with short brown hair, wearing blue glasses and a blue shirt. I do that as an access tool in case anybody is vision impaired or otherwise can't see me but wants to know what I look like. Um, so yeah, Francis gave a really good introduction. What I'm going to focus on most for this panel is my disability rights work and my work on kind of concepts related to neurodiversity and disability studies and how we think about the function of therapy. So I've always been disabled my entire life. I have multiple disabilities affecting my brain, including cerebral palsy and autism. So I've always kind of been interested in how I am processing the world in terms of having really intense sensory issues and having like movement differences and being a full-time wheelchair user and different ways like people's brains can kind of function. I don't have a formal neuroscience background. My background is much more in humanities, disability studies. Disability studies functions a lot like something like gender and sexuality studies, but for disability. So thinking about disability not only as something that is the domain of medicine or needs to be cured, but thinking like, how does disability function in the world? How do people think about disability? How can we challenge the way that people think about disability? Does all disability need to be cured? What does access and inclusion look like for everybody? You know, who has the right kind of brain or body, or are all brains and bodies valid, which is where I kind of land. So a lot of my activism came from a kind of disability studies, critical humanities tradition. So I've basically become an independent scholar ever since graduating from U Chicago. Originally, I thought I was going to do grad school and I was going to do a PhD in disability history because I love history. It was my undergrad degree. I wanted to keep studying disability history, and then I found out how horribly inaccessible a grad school would be for me, not only on a physical level as a full-time wheelchair user who needs care help from others, but also on a kind of social political level, having to play the politics of grad school and having to confine my interest to a really narrow disability, like disciplinary range, and having to maybe think about disability in a certain way according to a particular program or a particular advisor. So I decided that all those factors considered, that's not what I wanted to do. And I wanted to actually be able to follow my own interests and passions and pursuits and be really kind of cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary with my work. So I draw obviously on disability studies and history, but also I've gotten into musicology in the past couple of years. And for those who might not know, musicology is kind of the study of music, but not in a theory or performance kind of sense, but more how does music function historically and culturally across contexts. So there's musicologists who study like all different kinds of cultural contexts and areas of music. I mainly focus on music and disability studies and that kind of intersection. I'm actually not a musician. I haven't been able to find an instrument that I can physically play with some of my mobility challenges. But I've actually always thought really deeply about music and always experienced music very deeply. And kind of my first sustained exposure to music, other than kind of listening for pleasure, was through occupational therapy as a child, where it was integrated as part of my therapeutic goals. You know, certain music was meant to help me process visually better or meant to help my coordination. And all of this was kind of in service of so that I would be less impacted by my disabilities, so that I would be like better able, air quotes, to function more normally, air quotes, in the world. And at the time I experienced the therapy, I was like 10, 11, 12 years old. I didn't really think anything of it. Like I just thought, oh, music, you know, this music therapy thing, this music elements therapy is fun and enjoyable. And it was. But growing up and now having a disability studies background and looking back, I'm like, I really wasn't in charge of how I wanted to use music in my life. It was presented to me as, oh, this music will help you, you know, do this or that so you can fit in with others or so that you can take care of yourself better. But I'm like, hey, wait, I want to explore things like how do I use music to, you know, help me navigate the world or help me communicate difficult concepts or help me be with friends or help me, you know, make jokes and make nice parody music with people I care about and people I love. How do I use music to help my brain work the way I want it to rather than the way a doctor or a therapist would want it to? So that's kind of the neurology music intersections I've been exploring lately. And I can get people a link or provide a link to my music and therapy piece. It goes more into how I've kind of been able to reclaim the function of music in my life as more of like an access tool rather than a tool for like medicalized normalization. And I think I must be at time by now.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Steph, for that. We appreciate it. And just a reminder that questions can come in for any of our speakers, and we'll take them after our final panelist, who I'm excited to introduce now. Like I said at the outset, if you're here at the beginning, tonight is one of my favorite nights of the career fair because we go beyond, our physicians and our neuroscientists, and we get to have really cool folks like Jake join us. Jake Broder is a playwright, actor, screenwriter, and musician, currently working on the play Unraveled. Unraveled is a multimedia event, drama, music, art to deliver to an audience an experience of dementia, which reaches the boundaries of human creativity and really kind of gets us inside the condition. And it's just so important because, as we all know, that that the brain can be described sort of in neuroscientific terms, but what is happening and the experiences of those with these different conditions is really beyond just science. And so we need the arts. Jake is at that intersection. He's also an Atlantic Fellow at the Global Brain Health Institute, blending UCSF and Trinity College Dublin. And that's in part where he developed this play. A really versatile artist. He's got the critically acclaimed play Our American Hamlet that earned an IRNE nomination and an award-winning musical. Mira Ravel also co-wrote and starred in Lewis and Kate Live at the Sahara, and multiple TV and other acting credits. Holds a BA from Tufts University and trained at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. Jake, thanks so much for being here and sharing your perspective on all these brain questions. Like I said, it's really exciting that you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm really delighted to be able to have the chance to talk to you guys. So thank you so much. Okay. I think the best way for me to explain is to tell you what I'm talking about is to tell you a little story. Unraveled is about Dr. Ann Adams. She was a 53-year-old cell biologist in Canada at UBC, and she was a brilliant woman, and she was a terrible artist. And all of a sudden, she became obsessed with Ravel's Bolero. If you know that piece of music, it's the one Bo Derek was running down the beach, running to it in 10. Torvill and Dean played it for the Olympics and won with it in 1984. It's a piece of music which is very repetitive. It's 314 measures, and it's the same melody 7 times. There's no variation in it, and it repeats itself 7 times. What changes is the orchestration, and it grows and grows and grows. It's a magnificent but very mechanical piece of music, which is very different than the rest of what Ravel composed. As a composer, he doesn't have a giant output, but what he has is exquisitely well formed. And it was, one thinks of him, in the same breath as Debussy, and he's an impressionistic, a lot of woodly, 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 woodly. And but Bolero is very different. It was a very different piece of work. So Ann Adams became obsessed with this piece of music, and she started to paint it. And she painted this transmodal painting, which has 314 squares. And it goes like this, like squares, 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 and it goes down, 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 down. And there's another panel, and it goes like this, back and forth and back and forth. And the painting itself is exquisite. It's gigantic, and it is so detailed. It is like a perfect visual representation of a piece of music. It's exquisite. And everybody was a little bit shocked because she wasn't a very good painter before. And then she started painting pie to like thousands of places. And then she painted a migraine. And it was, like the aura, but she notated it so perfectly. And at that end, her behavior was changing. And at that point, she was then diagnosed with frontotemporal degeneration. She had the behavioral variant because she had some degeneration on both the right frontal lobe, but also mostly the left. And she had the non-fluent variant, which means it's more on the left, and that usually means that language is the thing that's affected. However, in the occipital lobe, visual processing was spared. Well, not only spared, but thereby hangs a tale. So she kept painting, and she painted more and then all of a sudden jumped into photorealism, which she wasn't able to do before. And then she became obsessed with radial symmetry. And then she became an extremely prodigious, I would call it like a memory painter, like painting that, you know, Stephen Wiltshire, the autistic man who was able to fly over a city and sort of draw it just after seeing it once. She did the same thing, except with a view that she was in Ghent, in Belgium. And she was able to recreate it, just a prodigious memory. So you're looking at a series of paintings through the course of a disease that tell a story about the hierarchy of neurocircuitry and revealed not only through what they were, but in the order that she was able to do them, what abilities were affected, or rather uncovered, by the degeneration of other places in the brain. So then there's a study, which there's a paper, I think it's by Dr. Bruce Miller and Dr. Bill Seeley up here at UCSF. And they measured, they compared her brain to, I think, 30 controls and found that she not only had degeneration in the front, but there was improvement in the back, and not just in terms of blood flow, but in terms of mass. There was improvement in the back. And the idea, oh, and here's the kicker, is that Ravel himself, they both he composed Bolero when he was 53, and painted she called it Unraveling Bolero when she was 53. 7 years later, they passed, both of them, or thereabouts. And when Ravel died, he went and had surgery to get rid of a tumor, even though he knew it wasn't a tumor. And they found that there was degeneration in the left front of his brain too. He had this, they called it Pick's disease at the time, but he had the same thing. They had the same disease. And the idea that these two pieces of art, this composition, which has lasted 100 years, Bolero, and this painting, which is an exquisite representation of that, existed and were created by people not in spite of, but supported by the beginning prodromal phases of frontotemporal degeneration. And that she, in a measurable way, had some enhancements and some skills that weren't there before. Really just blew my mind. And so I was like, this is a story that needs to be told, because it reveals that we can look at not only the deficits, but the abilities of people who have brain differences. And that it's not only the loss that we can measure, but it's the actual creative output or that stuff. And then as I look into it further, it points to the idea that behavior is in fact perhaps a biomarker to point towards early diagnosis. And so I got completely freaked out by this story and went up to met Dr. Bruce Miller, who's my mentor up at UCSF, and he was her doctor. And he told me the story of it, and I've studied it for a few years now. And creatively, this play is now being developed to be we're having our premiere next year at the Wallace in Beverly Hills, which I think is a 500-seat theater down there. And we have a composer who is composing using the same kind of transmodal rules that Anne used to create a new piece of music that goes throughout the whole play, ending with a performance of Ravel's Bolero, so that the last thing that happens after you've seen the play is that the audience experiences the painting. We project it and it's sort of create an animation around it so you can sort of be inside it while Ravel's Bolero is playing. So you can sort of see both things at once. And that's what's happening with that story. And around this work, we are creating an outreach program, which is going to tour along with the show. And we're currently having an outreach summit, I think in a couple of months, up in San Francisco, where we're getting FTD sort of thought leaders to join us, both from the scientific, advocacy, pharmaceutical, lots of folks, to sort of ask an audacious question: what is the next step to helping end FTD, and what can we do to make that happen? We're going to take that information and build an outreach program, which could be, caregiver support or physician education, or I don't know, it depends what they'll tell us. And we'll build that alongside the show. So when it tours, the show will come into town and there'll be outreach work that goes along with it that is selected by local communities depending on what they need. So this has been a 5-year enterprise, and we're reaching, year 5 of what I hope will be, the real launch of this thing. And through the GBHI, I have learned that doing work in the arts, which is mission-driven, evidence-based, advocacy-minded, but then filtered through the lens of entertainment, allows the project to both tell a story and make a positive difference in the world. And I guess the whole neurotheater side of this is that process, is that there is a wealth of amazing information, our understanding about how the mind works and how it affects behavior and what that means is growing exponentially. And there are so many stories that are kind of there waiting to be plucked, which I think we can use to help bring the world's attention to the idea that differences in the brain and differences in that we're not just looking for deficits, we're looking for enhancements, we're looking for asymmetry, and that is something that everyone experiences to a certain extent, and that is a great it's a great guide. And neuroscience seems to be the lens through which I find myself, telling these kind of stories. There are other projects which are related to different neurodegenerative diseases, which are on the boil, one of which is about the Colombian family with early onset Alzheimer's, the largest genetic cohort of, single origin Alzheimer's in the world, and how they have found a protective gene, the Christchurch variation, how it is potentially able to stop tau from spreading. And that the story of that family, which goes back 500 years, is an extraordinary one. And then there's another project.
Jake, could I interrupt for a second? We've got 10 minutes. I want to make sure we grab some questions. Maybe mention that last
Sorry.
time. Bring everyone up.
Right. Anyway, I can finish. Anyway, the point is there's lots of amazing stories out there. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry to go on.
No, they're great. I'm just going to add everyone here. So reminder, you can add your questions to the list we already have. And see, we'll add Andrew to the spotlight in a second as well. I wanted to start with a quick one. Well, I don't know how quick it will be, but hopefully quick, Jada, to you, which is that here I can add Andrew as well. There's a question of what does neurophilosophy research look like? Is it using your own data? Is it reviewing literature and getting your own thoughts about a topic? Is there a short version to that? What exactly is neurophilosophy research?
Good question. Again, depends on the path you want to take. My particular path is more traditional philosophy, lit review, kind of theorizing from what other philosophers are saying, doing some kind of synthesis of an argument and a picture of what certain pain experiences are like. I also like to look at and incorporate neuroscientific research that's already been done to kind of shape those theories. Other areas in neurophilosophy, people do participate in the lab and actually look at, what is decision making and have participants go into fMRI, see the action potentials of neurons to say whether or not we have intentions before we act. So it depends on the question that you're asking. If you want to kind of start in that philosophical lit review, theorizing and using studies to shape your theories, or if you're trying to decide how should the philosophy be informed through neuroscience work already being done and kind of being integrated and looking at brain research simultaneously in that kind of traditional neuroscientific research. So either way.
Yeah, thank you. Let me go to next. I'm going to combine sort of three questions, which I think is basically one for you, Andrew, which is some version of how do I get into this? So one of our participants asked, like, are there particular schools or programs to apply to? Another's asked, I'm interested in different classes, like what classes would I take as probably an undergrad? And then this more broadly, are there some platforms, podcast, website, like the book to read, sort of to kind of get introduced to this field? So kind of like, how do you get into it?
Well, those are all great questions. I think that the short answer is that there are not formal programs in neurotheology just yet, although we are working on them. I think in much the way many of the people on the panel have kind of gotten into these discussions, it's usually through some discipline. So what I normally recommend to people is that they do try to pursue a discipline that they're interested in. It could be medicine, it could be psychology, it could be philosophy, it could be theology. So there's a lot of different ways that one can do that, but then it is important to have training and coursework in neurosciences as well as these other areas, the philosophical and so forth. And so I think that it's really important to take a very broad array of different courses. And there are programs that are around. There's programs at Harvard, at Duke. There's the integrative medicine program at Jefferson, where I've been, that do have trainings and do have other approaches that people can engage in. So I think that it's growing. There, people should kind of continue to look at all of this. And I guess people could start with my website, and which is andrewnewberg.com, and they can find a lot of the articles and books and get going with it. And part of the reason for me being here is to get them to encouraged to begin to start that. So I work with a lot of students, both in terms of doing research programs and getting involved. And it kind of I was just thinking about the answer to your first question, which Jada gave a great answer to. But there are many different ways of really looking at the research piece as well. And so there's using cognitive neuroscience and imaging. We've done a lot of research by, as you were talking about, asking people questions. What do they think? What do they believe? What do they feel? Going about this from a very systematic kind of approach. And so there's a lot of ways that can be, real big, expensive ways with, PET imaging and MRI imaging. And there could be very simple ways by just asking people questions. So there's a lot of great opportunities. And again, people can certainly reach out to me, and I'd be happy to give them a little bit more specifics depending on where they are at in their training and what they're thinking about going into, because it does, if you go in to become a doctor, I thought once you went to medical school, like your decisions were done, but you become a psychiatrist, a neurologist, and do you want to do academics? Do you want to do clinical? So there's a lot of questions and a lot of things for you to try to develop as part of your career. So
And
happy
you're
to help
kind enough to
everyone.
stick around for this second hour.
And
So
I'm gonna, yeah, so people
can
can
go
just
ask individual questions and have
please
a
do. Yep.
back and forth. I have a question that's, I think, relevant both Steph and for Jake. You're working in advocacy fields where you're leveraging, and Jake, for instance, you mentioned talking to your neuroscience colleagues, UCFF, you're leveraging neuroscience. What is the value? But many, advocacy doesn't usually require like engagement with neuroscience. Certainly not, playwriting and TV production. But even in music, I'm wondering, maybe first Steph and then Jake, kind of what you see as the value and how you navigate the challenges of kind of sticking with the science and as opposed to just being, pure advocate without, maybe as much rigorous engagement as well on the interdisciplinary work with the science as well.
Yeah, I'll go first and I'll try to be quick. It's a good question. I'm not a hard science person, but I do try to ground my approach in disciplines. So in disability studies, in autism studies, in history, for example, and the kind of advantage of that over just talking about my own experience is a lot of what I found out about disability studies in college was reading through a lot of this theory, like, oh, I'm not the only one who experiences that. Oh, there is research around this. Oh, there is data to back up this thing that I'm feeling or experiencing. So I think it's not a requirement that you have to like cite every source if you're talking about your own experience, but I think if you can, just integrating some data or some theory in with what you're advocating for kind of helps lend credibility in certain circles. Because if people don't know that I'm an actual independent scholar and not just a quote unquote self advocate, people sometimes aren't as willing to take me seriously because they think, oh, that's just a disabled person talking about her own experience. But if they're like, oh, wait, you have studies you're citing, or you have some sort of research you're citing, or you've done a lit review and can point to different things in the research, some people are more likely to see the patterns that I see in a lot of this.
That's a really neat perspective. Thank you. Jake.
Yeah, I think Steph is exactly right. I think the issue, I would add to the credibility argument and say that the hard science is evidence that then becomes the platform on which you build your larger point. That I know there's a tradition where it's sort of one doesn't generalize from a single case. But when you encounter a single extraordinary case, the fundamental principles that underpin that case sometimes can illuminate a larger problem which a story can help bring people's attention to. So I enjoy the science is so informative because when you get to the edge of what is known, the rest is instinct.
Well, a neat way to put it. So with our last couple minutes here, I just would like to go around the entire group and get your thoughts on this question of mentorship. There are two questions that asked about this. One is just sort of, can you tell us your views on mentorship? And the other is, what are the qualities you recommend and what stood out to you as looking for a mentor? And I'll just put an additional spin on it, which is who have been your supports and advocates as you do things that are different than maybe what others in your group, whether it's a group of artists or a group of philosophers or a group of medical doctors are doing, and you raise your hand and say what you're doing. It's like, oh, I didn't know that anyone did that. You're blazing new fields. So just any final thoughts you have? I think we have a lot of students here who are really excited about what they're hearing and equally completely unsure about like what to do. And they probably don't know anyone else other than seeing your faces here. So any thoughts you have about mentorship and these sort of challenges of pulling these different fields together? And maybe we'll just go in reverse order where we started. So I guess that to Jake, we'd have you go first, and then we'll go Steph and Jada and Andrew. And the only thing I'd say is we'll keep them all the answers short, and because then we'll go to breakout rooms.
I would say my mentor is Bruce Miller, Dr. Bruce Miller here up at UCSF, and a lot of the people here at the GBHI. I would recommend looking into the GBHI. That's gbhi.org. If you are interested in brain health, they have a huge and wide-ranging platform. The qualities that I would advise to look for in a mentor is somebody who's high up the food chain, who's multidisciplinary, because that means that they aren't afraid of crossing the streams. And a lot of the good stuff in this field is all the in-between bits that nobody can quite classify.
Thank you. Steph.
Yeah, I'll say for me, one of my biggest mentors, especially in the field of disability studies and musicology, is Dr. Andrew Dell'Antonio, who's a professor at UT Austin. He's the one who convinced me I could be a musicologist even without formal musical training or a formal background in music theory. And a couple of my favorite things about him is he's like the best yes man ever. Like he's always like, yes, and whenever I have an idea. So it's just really fun to build with him. He's likewise fearless about disciplinary boundaries or about like, the nature of academic quote unquote propriety. He's like, yeah, if you want to put a playlist in an article, you can do it. If you want to like build a presentation and put memes in it because that's how you feel you communicate your ideas best, you can do that. So just look for someone who has your back and doesn't have any fear of like whatever your academic or other dreams are.
Thank you. Jada.
My mentors, I like to say I have a council of mentors. I don't believe in just one mentor. Because at least for me, I need advice in different areas of my life. So from the philosophy, from the clinical, and even to be frank, like what it is to be a woman of color in academia in a space in which I'm not common. And sometimes, and most times, that's going to be someone who's not doing the research that I'm doing. So I have a council of mentors that I converge with. I get all advice from all and then kind of cultivate my answer. And when creating your own counsel, if you think that's a good method for you, I think the things that I look for is someone who's willing to sponsor you, i.e., who's going to have your name and your back even when you're not in the room. That's how a lot of opportunities have come my way, and I'm grateful for that. Humility, who they're going to give you the answers that they have, and being in a place if they don't know the answers, they're going to learn with you or kind of find that good direction. And then lastly, for me personally, a mentorship is important of someone who sees you for your research, who you are as a person, right? How are you coming in and how do you need to be cultivated as a professional, as an academic, and as a person? And someone who's kind of supporting all that self-development are the people I gravitate towards. Thank you. Mentor I want to be.
I love that idea of a console. I have this image of them meeting and it's awesome. Andrew, last word on mentoring.
Well, echoing everything that everybody's already said, I was very fortunate to have two wonderful mentors. I guess what I would say, the people that I was looking for in a very similar kind of context were people who were willing to ask questions. I think asking questions is the fundamental part of who we are as human beings, and not be afraid to ask those questions and try to find the answers. I think it's also important to find somebody who resonates with the way you are. Some people are, really very detailed. Some people like to just go on, all over the place. So you want somebody who's consistent with however you are as a person. And I think the last thing that to me has been really important, and again, I've just been very fortunate to have these two mentors, is mentors that are very generous, that, kind of what Jada was saying about having your back, but, putting your name first on all the publications that you do instead of squeezing you out. And, I think it's really wonderful when they just try to keep getting you and moving you forward in your life and your career. So those are the things that I think are the most important in a mentor.
Great. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for tonight, for giving of your time. It's really wonderful. And we could go on and on and on, but I know your time is precious, and we also have an opportunity now to shift gears. So what I'm going to do is remove these spotlights. So thank you again, panelists, so much. And I am going to add and maybe ask for help from our team to add all of our breakout room to these. There we go, one more. And then I'd add Craig. Okay, great. So we're going to transition. I'm going to stay here in the main room and talk about anything you want. But our breakout rooms will be open. You'll be able to go to any of the breakout rooms, so you can bounce around. You can stay in one place. You can come back to the main room. And I'm going to introduce each of our speakers. And then as I do, breakout room leaders, if you want to say anything just kind of about what you might cover or anything else, just please do. So one a carryover, Dr. Newberg is going to stay for a breakout room, so you've met him. Next, my pleasure to introduce a leader at the intersection of neuroscience and architecture. Meredith Panasiak is Director of Research at Boulder Associates, which is an architecture, interior design, and consulting firm that's created spaces for healthcare and senior living. She is really looking at evidence-based, person-centered design, and she's a fellow with the Center for Conscious Design and maintains an advisory council role with, if you haven't heard of it, you should, the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture. We've got a really nice Neuroarchitecture 101 a program, like a full hour with on this topic. So maybe Chinmay, you can put that into the chat. Holds a Master of Architecture from Arizona State University and Bachelor of Arts from Xavier University. Meredith, thanks so much for coming back. And anything you want to say about your breakout room or the field?
No, thank you for that really nice introduction and look forward to meeting people in the breakout room.
Okay, cool, great. Next, we also have another returning star, Patrick Blones is adjunct faculty member at NYU and PhD student in computational neuroscience at Boston University and is expert in this intersection of philosophy and neuroscience. So all you philosophy majors, you can go talk with Patrick. His philosophy of science work looks at critiquing and improving measurement theory practices in education, psychology, and neuroscience. That includes something that probably many of you have done, interpretability of grading practices and standardized testing. He is also the president of the board of the nonprofit Simply Neuroscience. We heard about Simply Neuroscience before, our co-sponsor for this event, and a board member for the Society for Recure Studies, an international philosophical society. His bachelor's degree is in neuroscience and digital and computational studies, and a philosophy minor from Bowdoin College. Patrick, thanks for coming back. And anything you want to say to our group about your breakout room or?
No, thanks so much for having me back. Super excited to chat with everyone.
Okay, cool. Welcome. Next, Dr. Ariana Zuanasi is the project collaboration specialist in the research department at the Child Mind Institute, as well as resident scholar at the Sci Resident Collective. And she's looking at this interdisciplinary sci-art collaborations. Previously a filmmaker with the Pratt Institute, and coordinated multiple events operations for Imagine Science Film Symbiosis competition. That's where scientists and artists work collaboratively to create innovative short films. She holds a BA and MA in linguistics from the Università de Pavia, an MS in cognitive neuroscience, also from the Università di Trento, and a PhD in psychology focused on cognitive neuroscience from the University of Birmingham. So talk about merging arts and neuroscience. It's here. Thank you for being here, Dr. Zanazi. Anything you want to say about your background or the breakout room?
No, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here as well.
Okay, and last, certainly not least, someone who is part of our lab. So go us. Craig McFarland is a senior at Harvard College. He studies both neuroscience and philosophy and has a focus in his work on law too, with a minor in global health and health policy. He serves as Neuroscience Early Career Policy Ambassador to U.S. Congress through the Society for Neuroscience, the only undergrad to get that award. He's also conducted research in France and Switzerland and across a number of other institutions. Craig's been valuable in putting this career network program together with our other colleagues. And Craig, anything you want to say about, but I mean, I think you talk about fellowships and applying to schools and as an undergraduate, putting these things together. Anything else you want to say about your breakout room?
Yeah, I just want to say that like as an undergrad and currently as an undergrad, navigating neuroethics might be a bit difficult. Like there are so many opportunities, but maybe difficult to find. So I'm more than happy to talk about my experience, what I hope to do post-college, and the many opportunities that exist for us.
I guess you can also talk about life in our lab, like kind of how we do things. It's one slice, and what we do in the career network too. So, all right, I am going to open all of the rooms.